Hello everyone and welcome to this GCSE history video on EdExcel's The American West 1835 to 1895. This is an exam walkthrough. Okay, so you have got three different questions to answer for the American West paper. The first question is question 1. It's a 4+4 question. It's explaining two consequences so you need to focus on two consequences of a specific event. So exam advice, you need to give two clear consequences, and the exam booklet has spaces for a first consequence and a second consequence. Question number 2 is write a narrative account. So you need to use your own knowledge and show how events link together and go beyond the bullet points. You've got three different aspects of knowledge. So exam advice for this one is narrate what happened in the correct chronological order, showing how events link to each other, using phrases such as this led to, as a result of, a consequence was that. And then question 3 is two kind of 8-mark questions, and it's explain the importance of, and you have to choose two events from a choice of 3. So you need to focus on the consequences and impact of a particular event, explain how important it was. So you'll need to analyze the significance of an event and really think about its consequences, using phrases such as this was important because, this resulted in, this affected things because. Okay, so we're going to look at an example answer for question 1, which is a 4+4 marks question. So in this example, we're going to look at the Dawes Act in 1887 toward the end of the course. So explain two consequences of the Dawes Act 1887. Now in terms of how to answer this question, you need to write about two distinct consequences. Each consequence must include specific knowledge, such as a date, event, or name, and each consequence must include some analysis, such as what it led to, what the consequence was. So if you have a look at this example answer, I've highlighted for you in yellow where we've got the knowledge, and also in blue where we've got analytical and historical language. So let's have a look at these two example answers. First consequence. The first consequence of the Dawes Act was that it broke up communal reservation land to allow for white settlers moving onto the plains. This meant that indigenous peoples of the plains lost half their land within 10 years of the Dawes Act, restricting their opportunities. A second consequence of the Dawes Act was that it encouraged indigenous peoples of the plains to live in smaller family groups due to reservation land being broken up. This had the effect of weakening the power of chiefs and tribal structures and led to many moving away from traditional structures and cultural practices. So top tips, each consequence needs specific knowledge to support it, and try and focus on the impact of the event using analytical and historical language, such as this led to, this had the effect of, this meant that, or as a result of. So you're really focusing in on that second order concept of consequence. Okay, question 2 is the narrative account question. So we're going to look at an example answer focusing on the Mormon migration. So the question is, write a narrative account analysing the key events of the Mormon migration in the years 1846 to 1847. You may use the following in your answer. Attitudes towards Mormons, Great Salt Lake. Now, it's really important that you don't just rely on these two bullet points and that you go beyond the bullet points. You don't have to use the bullet points at all, but obviously they're there and they are relevant bullet points, so it's a useful guide to help you within your answer. So how to answer this question, try and write about the event and time period using specific historical knowledge. You need to give 3 detailed examples of knowledge within your answer. Use the bullet points to help you, but you must go beyond the bullet points. You cannot just rely on the knowledge in the bullet points. Link key events in an organised chronological order. So it's a good idea for this question to think about a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I would probably write 3 paragraphs. Use historical language such as this led to, as a result of, as a consequence, this had the effect of. So you are linking phrases together. So you're showing how one event led to another. Now I've highlighted on some of the example paragraphs in blue some of that historical language for you. So if our first paragraph is very much about the beginning of the narrative account, so let's have a look at this example paragraph. The Mormons were a religious group created by Joseph Smith. Their beliefs that all property should be owned by church leaders and their acceptance of polygamy which means having more than one wife, meant that they faced discrimination and there were negative attitudes towards them. By 1846, the Mormon community were living in Nauvoo, Illinois, but they were being persecuted and attacked. This led to their leader, Brigham Young, wanting to leave the United States. Young told President Polk that Mormons would leave the country for the, quote, sake of peace. As a result, Brigham Young planned to set up a settlement at the Great Salt Lake outside of the United States. His vision and strong leadership was a crucial catalyst for the Mormons deciding to migrate. So we can see in that first paragraph, we kind of focused on the attitudes towards the Mormons, and we've also mentioned a little bit about the Great Salt Lake as well. Now, if you go on to our second paragraph and think about the middle part, we are going to use some linking phrases here to really explain and analyze the narrative account. So, in order to successfully find a new settlement, a group of Mormons left Illinois for Omaha, Nebraska in February 1846. They set up rest camps along the Missouri River to enable other groups to follow them. This led to the Mormons grouping in Omaha by April 1847. Brigham Young wanted to create a new settlement at the Great Salt Lake outside of the USA, where the Mormons could worship freely. An advanced pioneer party of 150 Mormons set off for the Great Salt Lake, going along a route just north of the Oregon Trail in order to avoid coming into conflict with other settlers. These Mormon pioneers were sent to plant crops, build houses, and set up staging posts along the new Mormon Trail. As a result of their actions, this would enable other settlers to follow the trail and successfully establish the settlement at the Great Salt Lake. So again, we've got some phrases like in order to, this led to, and as a result of, which can really help you to make connections and show how one event led to another. So then your final paragraph can kind of round it up. So you think about beginning, middle, end. Due to the actions of the pioneers, the rest of the Mormon settlers were able to follow the Mormon Trail. The main party of migrants arrived at the Great Salt Lake in August 1847 and began to create the new settlement that would become Salt Lake City. This led to thousands more Mormons arriving at Salt Lake City in order to start a new life in the West. We've got lots of really good knowledge there. We've got some like key names, key events, some explanation about the journey that the Mormons went on. So we've got plenty of knowledge, and that good analysis means that we've fulfilled all of the criteria in terms of answering that question. Okay, so for question 3, you have got a choice of answering 2 out of 3 questions, and it's an explain the importance of question. So question 3 is kind of worth 8 plus 8 marks. So we're going to have a look at a couple of examples, and I would suggest that you write maybe a couple of paragraphs for this question. So question 3, explain the importance of changes in ranching for the cowboys' way of life. Now, how to answer this question? You must write about the event and time period using specific historical knowledge. Now, you need to write clearly about how X links to Y. So in this question, you're always going to be given a particular event, and then you're asked to analyse its impact or its importance on something else. So we call this thinking about how X links to Y. In this case, the X is the changes in ranching, and the Y is the cowboys' way of life. And it's worth you identifying that when you are reading and decoding the exam question. You also need to analyse the importance or significance of the event. So think about its results and what it led to. A lot of this paper is around consequences. Focus on knowledge and analysis and at least 2 well-explained paragraphs. So let's have a look at this example answer. And again, what I've done here is I've highlighted where we are linking X with Y. So we're going to use the key phrases in the question. So we're going to be using changes in ranching and way of life. By the 1890s, changes in ranching had led to the end of the way of life for cowboys in terms of living on the open range. The open range, where cattle grazed freely, was replaced by smaller ranches. This led to a demand for fewer cowboys, meaning there were fewer opportunities for cowboys. These ranches were fenced off using barbed wire. One important impact of this change in ranching was that fewer cowboys were needed, as barbed wire kept out competition and cut labour costs as it had prevented animals from straying. Employing men to build the barbed wire fences required much less labour than having cowboys employed all year year around. This was important for changing the lives of the cowboys, as it led to many of them becoming bankrupt and losing their way of life. In addition, second paragraph, in addition, the changes in ranching to the establishment of fenced ranches meant for those cowboys still needed their way of life changed drastically. No longer were they roaming the plains, but instead they were living in houses which were much more comfortable and included bunk houses. Previously, they had been sometimes sleeping out in the open. Due to the fact that cowboys were now living on the ranches, their lives became more controlled and stricter. The ranches often included strict rules which included no drinking or gambling. This shows that a key consequence of changes in ranching was a dramatic change to the way cowboys lived their lives. So, you need to place the event in the correct context, think about what became before and after, support your argument with detailed evidence, and make sure you analyse the importance of the event by focusing on the consequences. Use phrases such as "this meant that," "this led to," "as a result," and "this shows that," to really focus your analysis. Okay, so the last question we're going to look at is explain the importance of the indigenous peoples of the plains beliefs about land and nature for relations between indigenous peoples of the plains and settlers. Now, please note the exam board has previously used the term Plains Indians. Now, again, you're looking out for how does X link to Y. So X is the indigenous peoples of the plains belief about land and nature. 4, and then the Y bit is the relations between indigenous peoples of the plains and settlers. So you're kind of thinking about what do we know about the beliefs of the indigenous peoples of the plains and how does that affect relations between them and the white settlers. So let's read the first paragraph. The indigenous peoples believed the land was provided by the Great Spirit in order to share. They did not believe that land could be owned, which was in direct contrast to the ideas of white settlers. This resulted in huge tension between the indigenous peoples and the settlers, who would claim land as their own. As the indigenous peoples did not cultivate the land, white settlers believed they were holding up progress and preventing settlers from achieving their manifest destiny. This resulted in tensions between the two groups. Second paragraph. In addition, another aspect that was important was the fact that the indigenous peoples believed places like the Black Hills of Dakota were sacred and important to their religious beliefs. This led to tensions with white settlers who began to move onto and encroach on the site. This was seen as a threat to the indigenous peoples of the plains. In addition, the indigenous peoples of the plains believed that animals and spirits and all living things should be treated with respect. This was not a view shared by white settlers and led to tension between the two groups in terms of hunting the buffalo. Okay, thanks very much for listening to that exam walkthrough for the American West. I hope you found that useful and good luck. Goodbye.